Written by John R. Buck Surdu and backed up with a wide range of new models from Old Glory, Wars of Oz is a 120-page, softback, full-colour rulebook for a new fantasy/historical-ish wargame that's coming from Sally Forth. But dispel all thoughts you might have of Judy Garland skipping her way down the yellow brick road, because this is a quite different story and a rather different land of Oz. It's closer to the original books from L. Frank Baum, and it's been given a post-apocalyptic spin. We're introduced to the background in page 8, which comes after a comprehensive list of the book's contents. The History of Oz section brings flavour text about the world, and it also has a 2-page map. In short, the last Great War ended with madness bombs, and these ravaged the world, brought about mutated races, and, over the evolution of a few centuries, brought Oz closer to its current state. The arrival of the wizard Zoroaster in the west, and witches in the east, then unified some of those lands whilst dividing others, and in the centre, King Jack and his pumpkin heads held their ground. So, going on to the lands of Oz, which starts on page 13, we're given detail of each of the 4 major races in the game, and there's a large double-page spread of each army for each. There's Munchkin Country. The Munchkin army is the work of the wizard himself. Winky Country, part of the Witches' Alliance. Gilkin Country, and they're the force most strongly associated with the Beasts of Oz. And there's the Kingdom of the Quadlings. They're the subjects of the Witch of the South, the Lady Glenda. There's also Chronometria, and the provinces, and the independent kingdoms. And this brings in all kinds of other bits. In all, it's a huge amount of background detail, taking up about a third of the book, finishing on page 46. So a setting really ripe for you to do battle over. At page 47, it's time for the rules. A brief aside first. There's a designer's notes article, written by the people behind the game, in Wargames Illustrated 397. That's our January issue, and unfortunately it did sell out in a flash, perhaps something to do with some epic-scale American Civil War figures on the front. However, it can still be seen in our vault, on our website, along with almost 400 other issues. So if you've got a Prime subscription, you should go and check it out. If you haven't, maybe you should get a Prime subscription. Sorry for the brief advertising break. Back to Wars of Oz. Deeper rules details can be seen in the article, but we're going to try and give you a wider overview of the book here and talk about how it presents things. Well, in short, things are presented very well, at least when it comes to usability. You might have noticed that the sections in the book get their own reference numbers, and these extend to subsections and then to sub-subsections. So the rules are section 3. The units and attributes subsection is 3.1. Then the normal unit composition section within that is 3.1.1, and so on. This makes it rather simple to keep skipping around between the rules to find what you're after, just by consulting the contents. Initially, the rules examine that composition. Models are mounted on 50mm square bases, and regiments generally consist of a number of these bases, along with a mounted leader, called the regimental commander, who's individually based on a round. 4 infantry figures go on a square base, or 2 cavalry, or a large creature, such as giants. Next, it moves on to the stats. Marksmanship, melee and resolve are kind of obvious. Luck is about survivability in combat, and spell reflects casting abilities. Although this is a game of fairly reserved magic in all, not much in the way of fireballs flying about all over the place. Bases take damage. 4 in total for everything except for artillery, which takes 1 damage per base. Once it's taken that damage, it's removed. It's simple stuff. On to army composition, on page 49, there are several simple ways to construct your force, and on page 50, there's a huge table of unique abilities for your regimental commanders. This is a simple way to really mix up the play, and there's another for brigade commanders. Looking at the table, it's a chance to talk about another element of the book's design. Tables, other imagery, and the diagrams work well enough, but it has to be said they have a bit of a blast from the wargaming past look to them. At times they're striking, with some really bright colours, but they can feel slightly unrefined. Not the end of the world, and the content and its quality is really the most important thing here, of course. But when other publishers are making seriously gorgeous books these days, it does stand out as perhaps the one part of Wars of Oz that could have been improved a little. But moving on, To round out leadership abilities, there's the overall leader. There's more ability variation here, and in combining the overall leaders ones with the different elements previously mentioned, there's a ton of versatility available. Moving on, past the unit record charts to keep track of those details, we get into the rules proper. Reaction tests are a key feature, allowing the unit that's being acted upon to perform some kind of reaction. These vary depending on the action and the specifics of the unit itself, with different races generally reacting very differently to potentially the same action. And then there's activation, which kind of feels like a key selling point of the game. There's an activation deck, and leaders use their command radius to direct in-command units, those are ones that fall within that radius, rolling a d6 for each. These dice are placed with the leader as a command dice pool. There's also a d6 rolled for each of the units that's out of command, so falling outside of the radius of leaders. But these dice are actually placed with the units. So this means that the commander's not able to influence those units when they activate. An activation deck is formed of a set of red cards numbered 1 to 6, and a set of black cards numbered 1 to 6, along with 2 jokers. Each army is represented by a red or a black card, which is decided at the start of the game, and then the first card's turned over. If an out-of-command unit has a dice that matches this card, and of course taking colours into account to determine what unit side it is, then it gets activated. But if there are 1 or more dice in the dice pool that match the card turned, the player can allocate that dice to whichever matching unit within the brigade they want to activate next. It's kind of tricky to describe it in full. Hopefully we managed to do a bit of justice to it, but it works really well in game and keeps things always on the move. You're always having to try and guess what's going to come next. We're going to skim over areas such as formation, movement and routing, running from pages 57 to 60, as they work mostly as you'd expect if you've played any other. Well, the easy comparison is actually probably your favourite divisional level Napoleonic game. Once you scratch at the fantasy stuff that's wrapped around it, at its core, that's kind of what Wars of Oz is. And it seems to be a really intriguing, fun and well-designed one of those. Likewise, the rules for shooting are solid, and mostly what you might expect. They, and all the other elements of the game, are illustrated with very useful example pictures that clear up anything that might otherwise prove confusing or obfuscated. It feels a bit rude to rush through vast swathes of rules by saying, hey, they're kind of like other successful Napoleonic games, but, well, they do kind of just take good bits from various ones, put them together in interesting ways, and, they do it well. So, without making an hour-long flip through, this is kind of the easiest way to cover it and focus on what does make Wars of Oz unique. So, through shooting and melee, with more useful examples of unit matching in melee on page 69, and multiple units in melee on pages 72, that's the core rules kind of covered. And next, we get to some of the fantasy bits you don't usually encounter in your Napoleonic game of choice: flying beasts and floating balloons. These are some nice options that go some way to defining the uniqueness of certain races and their styles of warfare. Magic starts on page 75, and yes, there is magic, but it's still essentially a horse and musket wargame. The set of spells included for wizards and witches generally affect the attributes that define the units: marksmanship, melee, elan, and resolve, as well as those units' movement. There's other little things such as transport, which actually allows the spellcaster to fully move a unit. So they do impact the battle, but they're more likely to reduce an enemy unit's resolve, allowing a friendly unit to charge into them, than they are to immolate the opponent's entire flank with a huge fireball. 2 pages of spells round out the rules. So, at page 78, the slightly deceptively named Uniforms and Organisations section, or, as it might be easy to say, the army lists. There's lots of photos of models on the battlefield, for all 4 of the races, as well as tables that list their many and diverse troops. The Munchkin are the best shots in Oz, reflected in their high marksmanship attribute, and the likelihood they will stand and return fire when they're shot at or charged. A quadling army is based around a large number of militia, with the occasional elites mixed in, and they can also use eagle riders. The Winkies are aggressive, they're good fighters, and their most common reaction to coming under fire is an enthusiastic frontal charge. Gilkin have a well-developed artillery corps, field cavalry on trained mountain goats, minor witches and wizards, and a whole host of beasts. From page 88, the book covers introductory scenarios, 3 options for players to have a go at, but the book suggests that just about any historical scenario could be converted to use Oz units in. There are more cool photos shown here, battles in progress with masses of unusual fantasy units that look great. There's a creating scenarios section which has a generator, terrain rundown, and game board building blocks of sorts that can be put together to vary up the overall feel of your tabletop. It's a great addition that rounds out a generous and packed offering. And it'd be great if things ended here, but no, there's more, and it's a perfect addition for the times we live in right now: solo play. This creates an AI sort of gameplay style through a mechanic called posture that influences the decisions of the non-human player. It represents the attitudes of the, and engage air quotes here, opponent towards the game, reflecting the decisions that a human opponent would normally take. Game events and results influence posture, and posture is reflected in the actions that units take. Posture is a numerical value, and it's evaluated at the end of every turn. The number is the result of a range of behaviours chosen to reflect the confidence of that opponent. A more confident posture will result in an enemy who's more likely to be active, advancing and probing. A less confident posture will lead to a reactive strategy. It'll be defending, protecting objectives and returning fire. Really cool stuff. But now we are done, except for various play aids, and these will all prove useful in your gaming. They look quite heavyweight with all the text on there, but there's a lot of things here that come up quite organically in moments of gameplay. You won't generally be cross-referencing too much as you play. And now we've followed this yellow brick road to the end, but oh wait, one more thing. There's a mention of things to come on page 112, and they're taking a less standard route by changing up these fantasy rules to work in a historical setting, which could be really interesting. There's also links to the different Oz community things on social media, and that truly really is everything from the book. So, Wars of Oz is a really intriguing new game. It's got some very cool and some rather serious systems working away under the cover of what may, to some, seem like a rather whimsical style. Those who would dismiss it because of that, in favour of more proper war games, would, we think, be missing out on a new tabletop game that brings some pedigree and real quality to the tabletop.
This video has been brought to you by WI Prime, Wargames Illustrated Magazine's online members club. View more videos or find out more about WI Prime by following these links.